I don't know about you, but one thing that I've always believed unites the British people is a sense of fairness. I look at millions of hard-working, tax-paying, law-abiding Brits, and I think, however, today they're being taken for a ride. In Britain today, more than 1 million foreigners are claiming working-age benefits. And one thing we've learned this week, remarkably, households in Britain that contain at least one foreign national who are claiming benefits have received more than £7.5 billion in universal credit in 1 year. To put that in perspective, that's enough for 25 million winter fuel payments for British pensioners. Remarkably, some 40 nationalities in Britain, unbelievable, 40 nationalities, especially people from Congo, Iraq, Afghanistan, Algeria, Eritrea and Syria, are now claiming benefits at a greater rate than the British people, sometimes 4 times the rate. How is this fair or just in a modern civilised society? And you can see this shocking sense of injustice in many other areas of our national life too, like social housing, where it seems to me that once again the British people are at the back of the queue. When it comes to crime, foreign nationals, as we've also learned in recent weeks, thanks to freedom of information requests, are significantly more likely to not only be arrested, but also convicted of serious crimes, especially rape and sexual assault. Is it fair, I ask again, that the British people are being asked to subsidise people who are not only extracting billions of pounds from our national economy, who have become a net fiscal cost, not a net fiscal benefit, but are also more likely than the British people to commit crimes? And how is it fair that British pensioners have had their winter fuel payments taken away to save £1.5 billion a year, while our hapless politicians in the British state are wasting at least £5.5 billion a year on illegal migrants and asylum seekers who are entering our country, breaking our laws, in a system that our politicians refuse to fix? Between welfare payments for foreign nationals and the spiralling bill that is coming through our border crisis, you, British taxpayers, are currently paying somewhere in the region of £13 billion a year, or £250 million every week. The numbers are enormous, mind-boggling. And do you know what? These are not just statistics. What they reflect, let's be clear about this, are political choices that are being taken by people in Westminster who we elect to work on our behalf. Instead of being treated fairly, many people out there feel they're no longer being prioritised in their own country. And do you know what? I think they're right to feel that way, because treating your own people this way is the very opposite, in my view, of what it means to be British. As always, let me know your views at gbnews.com/yoursay. Hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. But joining me now in the panel, my top panel is senior reporter at Guido Fawkes, Ellie Wheatley, and journalist Zoe Grunewald. Ellie, we've had a series of stories over the last couple of weeks about foreign nationals taking £7.5 billion from the welfare system. You know, the numbers are enormous. At the same time, Labour are now about to preside over £5 billion of cuts to the welfare state, much of which is going to hit British pensioners, disabled people, the poor. There is a sense of unfairness running through this country now, is there not?
Yes, I mean, look, it's not just welfare reforms. You see the family farm tax, for example, that's expected to hopefully rake in about £500 million a year. At the same time, we're spending £500 million a year on foreign workers, etc. So you can see that there is a sense of unfairness. But at the same time, we also spent £78 billion on universal credit in total. So that's 10% going to foreign nationals, but that's probably around the population in the UK anyway. So there's that to look at. Now, the thing is that these welfare reforms that Labour's pushing, you know, to get people back into work, all sound very good and well. But at the same time, they're pushing plans and bills that's actually going to clobber businesses. So, for example, the Employment Rights Bill, that hurts British businesses, British employers, because not only are 2/3 of SMEs, for example, saying that actually they're going to cut back on hiring, they're not going to employ future workers, but how do you expect to bring 1.2 million people back into work when there's only 800,000 vacancies and you're actually just clobbering business British businesses and British employers.
Yeah, absolutely. Zoe, you're close to the Labour Party. You've got friends in the Labour Party. If I could just ask, we hear a lot about the welfare cuts. We hear a lot about the necessity of making these cuts. Is there not, though, a sense within the Labour Party that, hang on, these numbers are beginning to look obscene? The amount that we are spending on, let's be frank, people who are breaking our laws versus the amount that we're now going to gut out of the welfare system, which should be going perhaps to people who are disabled. Our pensioners have already lost their winter fuel payments. Even on the Labour benches, is there not a sense that this is completely obscene?
I think there's division in the Labour ranks over this. So there is part of the party, and that is probably the part of the party that is closer to the government, so closer to Keir Starmer and the team around him, who are worried about immigration, who are worried about the rising welfare costs, who want to see people be pushed back into work through removing some of their benefits. But there is also a large portion of the Labour Party who are very uncomfortable with some of the measures announced and actually want to see Labour take aim at what they believe is actually the wealth inequality that has spiralled in this country post pandemic, but also through the austerity years. You know, they look at the gutting of public services, but also the fact that, you know, the government lost 21 billion to COVID fraud. There have been tax cuts for the wealthy throughout the Conservative years. The government spent 37 billion on a failed test and trace programme. And meanwhile, during COVID, the richest 5% in this country continued to make gains while everybody else suffered with wage stagnation and job insecurity. So I think there is a part of the Labour Party that actually want to see the government focus on that, focus on trying to get the money back from those people, rather than going after disabled, sick, immigrants, pensioners, these people who are more vulnerable.
Ellie, it seems to me that there is a very real divide within the Labour Party, as Zoe said. You've got the sort of Lord Glasman, Blue Labour school of thought who are saying, look, we've got to get real about immigration, we've got to bring the numbers down. But at the same time, you've got a lot of more liberal, left, cosmopolitan Labour MPs who are saying, no, actually, immigration, that's fine, we'll keep wasting billions on this.
Well, of course, I mean, they have this issue where they're trying to... I mean, so, for example, reform, right? They're obviously getting a lot of... favourability in the polls on terms of immigration, and you see the red wall voters sort of. It's almost like a upside down shoehorn trend. So I was spoken to a few Labour backbenchers, and they say that actually immigration is a real concern that we've got to be, making a stand on. And we saw a couple of weeks ago, it was actually a GB News report where Starmer wrote a letter to his cabinet minister saying, it's not racist to talk about immigration, we must talk about immigration. But at the same time, you do have those on the left who are sort of much more liberal in their approach to immigration. But I think that quietly being pushed down by Starmer.
Sure. The other thing we saw this week, Zoe, is the Labour List survey of Labour Party members, and they were asked what's the primary threat to the Labour Party as far as they see it, and it wasn't the Tories. They said it was reform. Now, if you look at the immigration debate, you look at the welfare debate, there's an enormous opportunity here for Nigel Farage and Reform to step into that and to campaign on that. But at the same time, there's also a growing awareness on the Labour benches within the Labour movement that actually this reform problem could quickly spiral into an all-out assault.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think there's a real concern in the party that if the government don't deliver the change that they have promised, the platform of change that they stood on at the election, that voters will indeed shift away. And look at how the Conservative Party are doing. I mean, it's a barely functioning opposition. Of course, reform is more of a threat to Labour. Nigel Farage.
Although we did see Kemi Badenoch come out on net zero.
I mean, do you think she's going to last?
But she didn't say whether or not she'd actually just scrap the net zero target or not.
Hopeless.
She had set a new date. I thought that speech was actually sort of rather disappointing for Tory supporters.
And you talk to politicians, MPs every day. You're sort of plugged in. I mean, what's the reaction on the Tory side to that speech?
Listen, I think they thought it was a step in the right direction. I mean, the line is it's an announcement that has to be made. Net zero is not achievable by 2050. And I was going, well, OK, but what's the solution? And hilariously, she unveiled this new policy programme scheme that was basically what her shadow environment team to look at the policy. Isn't that really what they should be doing anyway? Anyway, so I think it was slightly disappointing for some people. But again, they think that they've got time, which they do. But actually, people are going to get pretty bored pretty quickly and pretty frustrated if she doesn't come up with some proper policies soon.
Yeah, there's also growing disillusionment, I think it's fair to say, in that survey of Labour politicians, of which are most popular among the ranks, with Rachel Reeves, the most unpopular member of the Labour government by some way. Keir Starmer not doing too well. I think Angela Rayner and Ed Miliband top the list. I mean, give us a sense of what the mood music is like within the Labour camp at the moment around Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, because my working assumption is the Chancellor's not going to get to the end of the year. You know, she's presiding over an economy. We're going to talk about it in a bit on the show, but she seems to be blaming everybody else apart from the government that's actually presiding over the economy. I mean, to what extent do you think Rachel Reeves is safe in her position?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'm hearing mixed things. I would say some of the newer MPs are just really keen not to kind of upset the ranks. You know, they have trust in the government. They want to keep going. They think any infighting would be very, very bad for the party. But I think there are some more established Labour MPs who are just concerned about the direction this government's taking, whether it will actually result in any change, let alone positive change. And I think the big question is who replaces Rachel Reeves? You know, and that's where you could see a real kind of bun fight over, is it somebody more on the supply side? Is it somebody who takes a more kind of Keynesian approach to the economy? Is it someone from the soft left? And that's when you see the worst of Labour's factional infighting come out to play.
Well, Ellie, I imagine it would be Wes Streeting or somebody who fancies themselves as a successor to Starmer. But also, what is Labour's response going to be to this reform issue that we've just been discussing, with the survey suggesting Labour now see reform, not the Tories, as a main threat?
Well, again, it definitely comes back to immigration. They've said they've made a lot of noise about it,
but they're not actually done really anything
haven't.
on immigration.
I mean, immigration is not even one of Starmer's 5 missions for, you know, the plan for change, whatever that really meant. And of course, we've seen boat crossing numbers going up, etc.
Up 25% on last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And also there is the worry that reform is sort of targeting policies, for example, like Thames Water and nationalising that. That's an issue that a lot of backbenchers are going, isn't that something that we should be pushing forward?
And also the collapse of factories across northern England, which both Nigel Farage and Richard Tice have made
I think
a lot of noise about.
They're sort of remaining rather quiet and letting the Tories and Reform fight amongst each other, especially in the locals, and sort of hoping that those, you know, the divide between the right, between Reform and the Tories, means that they basically come in on a second tier.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the early 2010s. I mean, I remember giving talks to politicians about the rise of the UK Independence Party, and I remember Labour politicians saying, well, this is good for us because it's dividing the right. But actually, if you look at what's going to happen in those northern heartlands and Wales and coastal areas, northeast and so on, actually Labour's probably going to get a bit of a kicking as early as the local elections.
Yeah, because reform isn't just... I mean, there are, I think, a lot of voters who like reform would describe themselves as being on the right, but there are also a lot who are protest voting because they are not happy with the centre ground. And especially if, you know, Keir Starmer keeps bringing the mantle to reform by talking about the same sort of issues, that only increases the salience of Nigel Farage and the Reform Party's policies.